Have you ever felt that something inside you is sabotaging your life? As if, even when wanting to surrender, you create distance? As if you want to love, but create emotional traps to be rejected? Have you ever exploded over something small and then couldn't explain why? Or worse, justified everything by saying, "That's just how I am." But what if this "just how I am" isn't you? What if it's just the reflection of the part of you that you hide even from yourself? Jung called this the shadow. Everything you don't accept in yourself. Everything that was excluded from your consciousness. Your oldest pains, your unresolved guilt, your hidden shame, your forbidden desires. The shadow isn't just the bad side, as many think. It's what you didn't have the maturity or freedom to face, and so you buried it beneath your skin. But what is denied doesn't disappear. It rots and ferments, and one day it leaks out. It slips out through a glance of disdain, in a passive-aggressive comment, in jealousy disguised as care, in demands disguised as concern. You think you're loving, but you're just projecting, trying to heal yourself through the other, trying to control the world so you won't be touched where it still hurts. The shadow wants to be seen, wants to reveal itself, and it does this in relationships. That's where it shows itself most strongly, because no one hurts us as much as those we love, and no one shows us who we are as those who mirror us. When you find yourself angry, maybe it's not at the other person. Maybe it's at yourself, for not being heard, for not being important, for still carrying an old abandonment that you pretended to forget. The shadow is the past that hasn't passed, the pain that hasn't healed, the child who still screams inside the adult you became. And until you recognize this, you'll blame others. You'll try to control everything. You'll demand love the same way you demanded attention as a child. All toxicity begins there, not when you hate someone, but when you don't understand what, in fact, you're trying to protect. Jealousy is born from the fear of being replaced. Manipulation is born from the fear of not being loved as you are. Coldness is born from the fear of being hurt. They are shields. They are armor. But armor, even beautiful armor, pushes away and kills what we most desire: connection. You are not just what you show. You are also what you hide. And until you look at the shadow, you'll keep hurting to avoid being hurt. You'll keep demanding to avoid being left. You'll keep suffocating to avoid being forgotten. But the shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It just wants to be heard and finally integrated. How many times have you heard someone say, "I love you," but that didn't sound like love? It sounded like a cry for help, like a demand, like a prison. The truth is that many of us don't love. We just use the other person to avoid drowning. We call fear of being alone love. We call the desperation to be seen passion. We call the unconscious desire for control affection. Fromm said that true love is an act of freedom, but what we see most are relationships based on silent domination. People who care too much but suffocate. People who love too much but demand constant reciprocity. People who are always there but make their presence a debt. Love becomes an invisible contract. I give you affection, but you have to heal my neediness. I offer you stability, but you have to keep me safe. I listen to you, but you can't leave me. And when the other doesn't fulfill the role we project, hurt becomes resentment. Jealousy becomes punishment. Silence becomes a weapon. Absence becomes punishment. This is not love. This is emotional hunger disguised as romance. Fromm was direct. Love requires effort, maturity, and courage. To love is to choose someone without needing to kidnap them. It's walking together without handcuffs. It's giving yourself without dissolving. But no one taught us this. We were taught that love is finding your other half, that love is when the other person completes us. But if you need someone to feel whole, you're not ready to love. You're trying to rebuild yourself on top of the other person. And the name for that is not love, it's dependence. Fromm says that true love is born from overcoming narcissism. That is, you stop seeing the other as an extension of yourself. You stop trying to change the other to fit your pain. You stop loving the version you created and begin to see who the other really is. This is painful because it requires giving up control. It requires accepting that the other is free, that they can leave, that they can grow away from you, that they can love you and still leave you. But this is the price of loving with truth, the real risk of loss. Only those who accept themselves alone can love without suffocating. Only those who learn to be alone can choose someone for love, not out of necessity. Fromm said, "Love is an art, and like all art, it requires practice. To truly love requires training. It requires self-knowledge. It requires presence. And it requires a daily decision not to use the other as anesthesia for your own pain. Because as long as loving is synonymous with control, love will get sick. It will intoxicate. It will suffocate. And one day, you'll call something a relationship that was never love, just a desperate attempt to feel whole, at someone else's expense." Most people don't wake up and decide, "Today I'm going to be toxic." But still, they are. We are. To a greater or lesser degree, we all have parts inside us that hurt, that manipulate, that sabotage. And the worst part? We often do this thinking we're loving. Toxicity is rarely explicit. It's subtle, camouflaged, polite, and even gentle. On the outside, care. On the inside, control. On the outside, affection. On the inside, sick attachment. On the outside, dialogue. On the inside, emotional blackmail. Jung called this shadow, the dark side of our personality, what we deny in ourselves, but that continues there, acting behind the curtains. The shadow is everything you hide, even from yourself. Your envy, your jealousy, your vanity, your need to be loved at any cost. And when you don't recognize this repressed content explodes in your relationships. The shadow appears when you demand attention, but call it care. When you victimize yourself, but call it honesty. When you make the other person feel guilty, but say it's just venting. Fromm compliments this vision brutally. He says that modern human beings don't know how to love because they relate as consumers. The other becomes a tool for emotional relief. If they serve me, I stay. If they frustrate me, I discard them. Love becomes an affective business model. I give you what you want if you give me what I expect. But this is not love. This is emotional market. Result? The person stops being an end in themselves and becomes a means, an instrument to relieve your existential pain. You don't see the other. You see what they do for you, what they give you, how much they relieve your loneliness, your anxiety, your emptiness. And this is toxic. But here's the cruelest point. The more wounded you were, the harder it is to love without contaminating. The child who is rejected grows thirsty for affection, but this thirst deforms love. The teenager who was humiliated seeks to prove worth in romantic love, but this neediness becomes power, becomes jealousy, becomes imposition. The adult who never looked at themselves demands that the other see them, admire them, save them. But no one saves anyone. And demanding that someone fill you is condemning that someone to an emotional prison. Jung said that as long as the shadow is unconscious, it will dominate your life, and you will call it fate. The shadow of who you are will shape your patterns, your jealousies, your need to be right, your tendency to push away those who love you and chase those who despise you. Fromm goes further. He states that toxic love is not born from evil, but from emotional immaturity. Because loving requires courage. It requires losing control. And for many people, it's better to control than to be vulnerable. It's better to demand from the other than to face your own pain. But the more you deny what you feel, the more your unconscious spills this pain into relationships. The good news? This can change. Jung believed that there is only real growth when you look inward, without masks. And Fromm said that healthy love begins with love for yourself, not in the selfish sense, but in the sense of becoming someone worthy of loving and being loved. When you have the courage to look at your shadow, it stops controlling you. When you recognize your neediness, you stop projecting it onto others. When you take emotional responsibility, you free the other from the obligation to save you. And maybe that's where true love begins. When no one else needs to be the villain in your story, nor the medicine for your pain. The opposite of toxicity is not perfection. It's not becoming an enlightened being who never feels jealous, nor someone who loves without error, without fear, without failure. The true antidote begins with awareness. And awareness, contrary to what they say out there, hurts. Because when you see your shadow, you also see everything you tried to hide. You see control disguised as care. You see fear hidden behind anger. You see the scared child behind the aggressive adult. And this is where healing begins. Not in denial, but in integration. Jung didn't talk about eliminating the shadow. He talked about making it conscious, looking at it and saying, I know you're here. I don't run anymore, but I also won't let you decide for me. Fromm goes in the same direction. For him, love is an art, and like all art, it requires practice, surrender, humility. To love is to accept that you'll never be ready, but you can, every day, be more present, more honest, more available. The antidote begins when you realize that you also have flaws, that you also hurt, that the problem isn't always the other person. Sometimes it's you. It's your expectation, your haste, your attempt to be loved without first knowing yourself. But here's the point. This is not a reason for guilt. It's just the starting point. The shame you feel when you see yourself can become compassion. The pain you feel when admitting your patterns can become choice. The same hand that hurts can learn to care. It's not fast. It's not linear. Sometimes you'll relapse. You'll repeat old patterns. You'll feel like you're not evolving. But awareness has already planted a seed that doesn't unlearn. You'll start to notice earlier, to breathe in the middle of impulse, to be quiet when you used to explode, to ask when you used to accuse. And this is already transformation. You'll discover that self-control is not repression, it's listening. That loving someone is not erasing yourself, it's including yourself. That moving away from what makes you sick is sometimes the greatest act of love you can offer to yourself and to the other. Healing is made of small silences, of simple gestures, of decisions almost invisible to outside eyes, but immense for those who feel them inside. You won't defeat your shadow, but you can learn to dance with it, slowly, awkwardly, honestly. And this step is just the beginning of something much more true than any toxic perfection they promised you out there. The question is not, are you toxic? The real question is, can you dare to face yourself before begging to be understood? Can you stop pointing and start remembering? Toxicity doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, softly, with kind words and cruel motives. with gestures that look like love, but are just fear dressed up. Sometimes it's not evil. It's just pain, unprocessed, unspoken, unheld. And that pain begins to speak for you. You don't need to be flawless, but you need to be accountable. Accountable for what you feel, for what you demand, for what you give, and what you infect others with. Because your shadow doesn't stay in you, it leaks. It spills into who you touch, into who you love. And if you don't hold it, you'll pass it on. Jung would say, being whole is more important than being good. Wholeness is truth. Goodness can be performance. Fromm would remind us, love is not a feeling, it's a decision, a daily, deliberate act to choose connection over control, presence over possession, honesty over comfort. And the truth is, no one will rescue you from yourself. No partner, no therapist, no video. But maybe, just maybe, this is where you start. Not by becoming someone new, but by finally meeting the one you've been hiding, the one beneath the armor, the one beneath the noise, the one who's been waiting for you. Because in the end, healing doesn't arrive like lightning. It doesn't crash in and fix you. It arrives like a candle, lit in silence, in the middle of everything you didn't want to feel. Small, quiet, but steady. And it's enough. Enough to remind you that even when everything around you is shadow, you still get to choose whether you add more darkness or become the light. If this moved something inside you, stay. We're building something for those who don't fake it. Subscribe, not just for the content, but for the confrontation. And if this left a wound, maybe it was meant to. Sometimes the best way to go deeper is to share the pain. Share it. Healing doesn't ask for applause. It asks for honesty. And maybe someone else is out there, still hurting in silence. Let this be the signal. Let this be the mirror. Let this be the beginning.